All right. Tonight, we're going to cover some more lightning components that I built. Yeah, I built them. Okay.
Here on all Brian this time.
What just happened? What was that, dude?
Play the
dude, I heard you like some lightning, so I put some lightning in your lightning so you could use lightning when you're using lightning, man. Sorry, I'll just bump us in.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so welcome to System.Debug.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, you're welcome. Anytime. I'm glad you're here, Ryan. I'm glad you're here, RJ. Did you guys have a good weeks?
I had a good week.
Yeah?
Yes, I had a good week.
Ryan's at a new angle tonight. Why are you at a new angle, Ryan?
Because we are redoing our basement, and there is absolutely no place for me to put all my stuffs.
Are you going to have that level in for the rest of the episodes? Because, like, we do all of them level. Get it? Like, this is level 30.
No. I actually prefer to do it standing up.
RJ's trying so hard to not be mad at me for that one.
The dad puns have started already.
That's right. Yeah. All right. So welcome to level 30 of System.Debug. This is our 30th episode. Whether or not that's important to you, it's important to us. Tonight we're actually... What's that?
Sorry. I said it's kind of a milestone.
I think so. It's a 30 milestone. So that being said, tonight we're going to actually continue on talking about some lightning components. And while we do that, we actually want to pitch something out to the community, and that is to show us your lightning components. We want to know if you guys have done anything that's really, really cool that you've created an unmanaged package or a managed package for, and we want to demo it here for you on System.Debug. So go to system.debug@gmail.com, and that's spelled out, so system.debug@gmail.com, and send us a link to your unmanaged package or your managed package. Make sure that we can install it and that we can actually run it, and explain to us in the directions what you're expecting the outcome to be. We're going to pick some of our favorites. We're going to show them here on System.Debug in a couple of weeks, and we are going to make sure that on social media you guys have a deadline and a place to go for that stuff. So stay tuned for that, and we really look forward to some of the cool things that you guys are creating out there in the Lightning ecosystem. Yeah, guys?
Yeah, I love seeing what other people are doing with it. Yeah.
Cool.
Because there's so many different perspectives, so you never know what you're going to get.
No, it's true. It's a box of chocolates. And with Lightning being the way it is, Lightning's been out for 2.5 years now, right? About 2014, the end of it. 2015, the end of it.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so I would think by now one or two of you out in the dev ecosystem have messed with this, played with it, and come up with some really cool ideas. I know I have, and I want to see more and more of those. We want to inspire some of our developers in our community to come up with some cooler ideas based off of what you can show us. So if you don't mind sharing, we would appreciate seeing it.
Yeah, and open at all levels too. I mean, it's a good way to, like, if you have an idea and you haven't dove into Lightning components yet, dive in now. Send us what you got. Send us what you end up with, because I mean, that's how you learn. That's how you learn the new platform. Find a problem.
It's a good excuse to learn.
Find a problem and solve it.
Yeah, find a problem, solve it.
That's right.
Just like Vanilla Ice.
And you could be famous.
It's so famous.
So famous.
That's right. Have any idea how much Salesforce Stu will know who you are now? And Megan?
Oh, yeah.
They'll know you now.
They'll know who
Megan
you
will
are.
know who you know.
Megan will know who you are.
She probably already knows you, though. She knows a lot of people, I feel like.
I absolutely agree. I think Megan and Stu are both huge assets to the ecosystem that are Salesforce.
Absolutely.
I was just talking about number of people they know, but yes, also huge assets.
Yeah. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack us with that.
You made us go tangential, man.
Kind of side railed there. Yeah, go for it, Bryce. Show us what you got, because I like Lightning, and I like to use Lightning while I'm using Lightning. So if you could put some Lightning in my, that's getting old. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to present to everybody. And let's see here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I think this is the right one.
Yeah, and you can tell that this is live and unrehearsed. This is the beauty of this show. Okay, there it is. There's the screen.
So we can all see my screen. Okay, so actually right here, believe it or not, this is the lightning component. And in our system.debug org here, we don't actually have a ton of them. If I was to log into some of my other sub branches, you'd see a ton of them here. But what I've done is created a component that will go out and find every other component in your Salesforce org and allow you to run it from the click of a button rather than having to drag it onto a page. So what's the benefit of this, right? I know I've talked to you both about this in the past and others. And what's crazy is the number one benefit I have gotten out of this is developing other Lightning components. Okay. So what I mean by that is, in a sense, what this does is this will allow me to run any other component inside my Salesforce org. So what I call this is the Lightning HUD. If I click the Lightning HUD button, it's going to bring open a modal. It's going to ask for any of my parameters that I'm looking for. Same with like the polymorphic field component that we looked at a couple of weeks ago here, is that if I wanted to, this actually looks at all of our parameters that are coming out on the sidebar when you first drop the component into the page.
Polymorphic join, last week's episode.
That's right. And then I can actually run this without any other without having to drag the component onto the page is what I'm basically saying. You're not like restricted to having so many components into one page. Now you can actually limit it to a button size. And the reason why I feel like this is a valuable tool to developers is because lately I've been trying to build this calculator out. As those of you on system.debug know, I've been hitting you up every single weekend complaining about one thing or another. And actually Megan probably knows this too, because I've probably complained to her about it. So the benefit here is being able to create a component, but without actually having to continually drop it onto a page to test it, right? I can actually start developing a component right away, and it's going to show up in here. And with instance of like my calculator component, I can just click a button and run it. I don't have to constantly drop it onto new pages or configure a brand new component. It's just immediately in my list, right? So how am I doing this?
Tell us.
It's
Come
actually
on, man.
quite simple. So when I'm looking at my component itself, it's very, very light. The vast majority of my component is actually just the modals that pop up, right?
Okay.
Aside from that, there really isn't a ton of stuff. I've got a spot that I'm going to hold all my buttons in. There's a modal for when my form pops up, if there's any design parameters that need to be entered. And then I have a modal for the actual component itself. And then down here, I've got some templates for my form itself when I'm actually inserting design parameters. And my test, very light because I'm a horrible tester. I'm sorry about that.
Jeez, man. Don't. Oh my God. Don't admit that, guys.
This is actually a great example. So for right here, right? This was the design parameter that I was kind of playing with this design parameter, and that's why it's all undefined in here, but it's even unnecessary. And what I meant by like testing is that, let's just say I'm testing this and I realize, is that even like, oh, you're killing me, Lightning. Okay, we're going to move on. But let's just say you were like messing with little things inside of your code and you just wanted to be able to run them right away. It would let you do that, right? Now, obviously, because I have my component on my page right here, it's going to say you're already utilizing it. You can't remove attributes that you've already created, which is, you know, standard Salesforce. And we're actually kind of thankful for the fact that it won't let you delete code that's being utilized, right? That's kind of a good thing. But aside from that, if I'm looking at like my helper.js, it's also a very light file. We're looking here, 79 lines of code. And, you know, we're going to go out, we're getting our actual Lightning bundles, which is querying all of our, if I go over to my actual Apex controller here somewhere, oh, I must not have it open. Lightning controller actually is ridiculously light as well. It consists of two methods. One is just building the Lightning data, and as you can see, it's just a query that's going to go out and grab all of my Aura definition bundles. And then the second one is passing the ID that I'm grabbing. It's all I'm doing is building out my buttons with some of this information, including the ID of the actual Lightning bundle I'm looking at. And that's what I'm sending over in the second attribute here, or the second request, is to go out and actually fetch the component itself. And this is all the information you need to get this going, right, is 2 queries. 1, query your definition and bundle, and 2, query your actual bundle itself, right? Once that happens, it's just a symbol, or it's just a matter of parsing all of that information. Now, I do want to say something about Lightning, or about unmanaged packages, if I can, that Megan, believe it or not, because I was having Megan test this in the background, and I remember sending her the first link for the Lightning HUD, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "It's all broken." Okay.
Yes.
It wouldn't install into our org. This was a big mistake on mine, and it's something that I feel like we should be sharing with developers going forward, and that is a lot of the static resources that you may decide to use in your programming, people are already using. Okay. jQuery, for instance, if you name a static resource jQuery, there's a good chance that when they install your package, they already have a static resource called jQuery, and static resources do not get the namespace.
Right.
So
you're gonna break everything.
Right. So a good practice is to actually create those and zip them up. And then that way you can actually name your zip file something unique. And then, okay, she didn't say it was all broken, but she couldn't get past the part that was broken to determine it was working. So
she just pointed out it was wrong.
She just pointed out that it wasn't working. I respect it, though.
She's just trying to help you out.
But I needed that. That's what I needed.
No kidding.
It worked on my side. It worked for me. I don't know what she was doing.
That was my entire job at Map Anything.
That's like the classic dev customer experience right there. It's working for me. Like, I don't know what you're doing wrong.
Did you have Megan fill out a case? That's what I want to know. Did Megan fill out a case?
No, she didn't. But apparently, if I'm reading this correctly, it took her 3 orgs to install it. Did you happen to install the new link I sent you? Because that one was working, I think.
Wow. Anyway,
I don't know.
So
keep
us moving along here. Where did you leave off?
So nonetheless, zip up your static resources. Put all of your static resources into a single repository, and then upload that as a static resources, and then make references to that, because when you're building out these packages, your customers are going to be a lot happier for it, right? So that was one of the big takeaways that I figured out as I've been developing these components and trying to share them out to the community. So nonetheless, some of the other really cool things that I got to learn about this project that I had known previously was the way that you can dynamically generate the components onto the page. Okay. And what I mean by that is that Salesforce has this, like, and I don't know if it's native to Salesforce or how it normally works, but it actually accepts it as an array. And so if you look kind of like in my code right here, you'll see I'm building out these elements on the page as actual strings in an array, right? They're just JSON objects. And Salesforce is what's taking those and creating the components for them. And I can actually set them inside of them. So every component has its own, or every element has its own body, we'll say, right? It's the thing that's, I guess, the content of the element itself. And what you end up doing is sort of looping through these and appending the child into the parent, and then that parent into a new parent, and that's sort of how Salesforce can structure it before it'll actually load the component onto the page. So that was something that, it took me a minute to kind of wrap my head around, and I was working with our style guy, who his name's Rashad, and he's the one who was kind of helping me work through a lot of the LDS style systems to implement them here. Amazing. And it took us a minute nonetheless, but the overall project ended up being very light in code, and that was super exciting to me.
Yeah, that looks pretty cool.
So that's huge, though, when you think about it. Like, think about all the restraints that Salesforce has around things like this, around lines of code, around testing, around all that stuff, and then think about making something lighter. That's kind of the goal, right, for a Salesforce developer?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah. It's not, that's not across the board. I mean, a lot of people do like to do things of that nature, but I'm just saying, specifically Salesforce developers, you got to make it light.
Yeah. So the the part where you popping up your modal, so you're actually able to read the design file when that loads and determine whether or not you need to ask for parameters. Like if I'm expecting record ID or something, you can prompt the user for that right there. Because that was going to be my question. Was okay, that's all well and good to throw them on that page, but what if I have parameters that I'm getting from a parent component or something else? How do I simulate that? And is that what you're doing then? Is you're just reading that design file somewhere and says, oh yeah, I've got an attribute that needs a value, fill it out.
Yes, and here's what was kind of crazy about that, and I'll admit, like, I probably didn't do it the best way. But the way it comes back is actually like this right here, where it comes back with a specific design tag. So when you query these components, you can actually get the code for them, right? Now, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not rendering the code that's coming back, but that's actually one of the fields, is to be able to view the actual code inside of the component as it's rendered. And it's the same with the designs. And since HTML doesn't really have a native way to digest this information into a form, I ended up just kind of parsing out all of these design attributes and changing them into divs. And that's all I had to do to actually get it to work. And then because they actually have, as I've stated here, Lightning has some restricted attributes. So before we create our element, we are going to need to replace the restricted attributes with our own non-restricted ones. So attributes like name, label, description, those are reserved by Salesforce inside of input tags. Okay, so we couldn't use those because Salesforce is looking at them. And so I just simply did a data.name or data-name, data-label, data-description in order to get around that. And then later in my code, you know, I'm replacing those as I go and pulling that information back and passing it to Salesforce in order to build the necessary component information.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, that was my concern, was just like, okay, I'm gonna have, you know, all my components, pretty much everyone that I wrote needs some sort of input from another component or something that gets passed in, and it's cool to see that you did that. So I think that's actually, I have to admit, the first time I saw it, I was like, yeah, I don't get it, man. But to actually write it and be able to load it without having to go and create a Lightning page first and drag it on and try it, like if I'm writing a bunch of them, I can just click, oh yeah, that works. Oh yeah, that works. That'll help. You know, I think that'll help a lot.
Well, and that's what I'd found, was that the more I was building more and more Lightning components, the more I actually kind of turned to this component as a tool. You know, was that, okay, this is here, it's just a button, rather than going to my accounts, clicking the edit the page, because as a developer, this component is for an admin. Right? That's how I always feel about any component I develop. I'm not actually developing a developer's tool. I'm always developing an admin's tool. And maybe that's like a very biased, irrational approach, right? Because developers need tools too. I mean, we look at some of the other people that we've talked about, Welcome Suite. They saw a need for a developer and they filled it. But I think most developers don't think that. We are kind of trying to solve solutions for admins more than ourselves. And this actually ended up being a tool where I was looking at it going, this is far more helpful, I think, to a developer or to a QA person than an admin.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're visually unit testing your individual components, right?
Right.
I can see somebody making the case for it just being kind of equally useful to all three, essentially. But I mean, to your point, a lot of people do develop towards the admin side because I think, I mean, this is again anecdotal, but I think most of the people out there are admins, right? Or there are just a lot of admins.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily even say that most are, but I would just say that the vast majority of a developer's customers, whether it's because they work with them or whatever, the driving force behind most feature development, most tool development is the clientele, the people that are using the actual software, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so just as a for instance, when I was working on different Salesforce projects, everyone that I was talking to, client side, was pretty much an admin, you know? So that's why I say is anecdotal for sure, but you know, that's who we deal with a lot as developers, you know. So it makes sense.
As a consultant, I mean, 90% of the time, my first point of contact at any of the places is the admin, right?
Oh my gosh, the
Admin.
day they bring a dev on the
Yeah.
screen.
What was that?
The day they bring a dev on the screen, or just like in the call, and you're kind of like, oh, I got to actually make sure that I'm saying the right things because this person knows if I'm razzle dazzling. You know, like I'm not allowed to just speak words anymore. So Megan brought up an
Megan's
interesting
right,
question.
yeah.
What is the 80-20?
What is
Oh,
the
is it just like for every 80, like that it's just, you know, shut up,
It's
RJ.
exactly what you're trying to say. Yes. It's what you're trying to say, but unable to say. Yes. And she's right. Salesforce, I think, does put admins in the spotlight more. But that's just.
Well, and that's the reason behind the show, right? Because we want to make sure that we're giving tools and advice out to developers as well as admins, because there are a lot of resources for admins out there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there aren't a ton for developers.
Right. Right. I mean, developers largely, I mean, yeah, it's largely an administrator's world when it comes to Salesforce, right? And developers, I mean, I've often heard some developers say, you know, I don't see the need for a developer anymore if they keep, you know, making it so, you know, easy to use, et cetera, yada, yada. And I've heard some developers complain that, hey, by calling everybody a developer, it's cheapening what a developer is. And I don't believe any of that crap. If you're a developer and you just keep developing. Who cares what it's actually you're actually calling you? But yeah, we're here to help developers and admins both all along. And you know, this tool happens to feel a little more developer focused, but yeah, I like I think, like I said, I was struggling at first with, okay, I really don't see a use case. It's kind of cool that you're kind of putting some lightning in my lightning, but yeah, to be able to just throw this up real quickly, you know, add that component. It's on my page. Bam, run it, fill it if it needs a attribute or whatever. I think that's pretty slick, actually. I'm kind of happy you wrote that.
Well, and the goal is to expand it, right? And what I would hope is that like people get inspired and maybe even do more than that. And that's kind of like what we want to see from the other developers out there who are creating Lightning components, whether it's for their company or on their own. And especially if it's on your own, you've had some kind of idea. We want to showcase that because you may not have figured out why that idea is great. You had it, you had to program it, and we have all been there when you've got to program something regardless of its validity. But I think that there is a subconscious part of all of us that goes, somewhere somebody needs this. I don't know who, and I don't know why, but I needed to build it for them.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we want to showcase that. We want in hopes to inspire some other people out there with some of the components that some of you other developers have been creating. So please send us any of the components that you guys want to showcase that you feel comfortable. We're not going to show your code. We just want to show some theories, some ideas. It needs to be able to work in our standard developer org as a unmanaged or a managed package. If you want to share the code, let us know in the email, system.debug. Feel free to show my email or code. And if you don't, that's fine too. We're just anything that can get you some credit, anything that can get your code some credit, and expand what the developers are doing for the ecosystem, right?
Let's throw it out there. You know, I think that's a fantastic idea. Sorry, Ryan.
No, that's fine. I was just going to add, you know, with this huge push behind Lightning, and, you know, I kind of get the feeling that, you know, not enough people are adopting fast enough, et cetera. We can, you know, I like what they've done with it. I'm really happy with it. Yeah, there are some things that are still working on, but man, it's light years ahead of where it was even 2 years ago. So I think this can only help is when people start creating these unique solutions to problems and, you know, interesting components that it's only going to drive. Like, oh my God, I didn't know you could actually do that in Salesforce.
Well, I find that Lightning is like, there's a big mishap behind it. And I think a lot of companies, a lot of ISVs, a lot of established companies, you know, they've got these softwares, they've got these mindsets and they're stuck in their ways. And Salesforce had Lightning come around, and in its infancy, it was really just a form on a page that didn't do much. Years later, the stuff that I'm discovering in Lightning, I will definitely say rivals that in Visualforce, that in Apex. It's an amazing framework. Once you start digging into it, I guarantee you most developers are going to find out that it's a lot more familiar and forgiving than they remember from 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember when they first announced. I was so ecstatic. I think it was my first Dreamforce, and they announced Salesforce 1. And oh, you're able to add. You can create pages here, there. And I was so excited, and I went in and I tried to write something, and I had it. There was a lookup on the page, and let me tell you, that was just not available there at the time, and it was ugly, and I was just so let down. And then fast forward a few months and, oh, I'm able to do X, Y, and Z and forward. And here we are 2 years later. And man, it is a full-fledged platform. And I have become much more efficient working in components than I am in Visual Force. I was never a fan of Visual Force.
Absolutely. And especially when you scale your components. When you're looking at your components, like, I just need a component that renders this sort of information. And then you're dropping it everywhere. That's amazing.
Yep.
Shut up,
you get a component. You get a component.
You get a component. You get a component.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
nice.
It's moving at the speed of light. I've been bit by it twice now with different presentations at different community events where I write something and I'm like, because it doesn't have this. And then the very next release has it. And that's usually like 2 weeks after I present on it. Or even, I think at Tahoe Dreamin', I found out that it was coming out 15 minutes before my talk. Chris Carter's like, oh yeah, they've got that. And I'm like, oh crap. Well, that's fun. Well, at least I focused on Lightning Data Service then and not this other piece that I wrote. But I mean, it was, it's constantly evolving and coming out with more and more stuff. And so, yeah, the more that you can contribute and show unique solutions and, clever components, stuff that you're writing, the better for everybody. Uh-oh, he's chuckling. See, I
like
feel
a flash of lightning.
I'm at a loss.
Megan, it's not cheesy.
I'm not logged into the YouTube channel.
Is that a Salesforce dev prerequisite? Is that you guys have to like come in with like 10 fresh dad jokes or something? They grade you on your. They're like, no.
Yeah, you get your practical.
Get him out of here,
and then you get your dad joke practical. You know what I mean? Practical. Yeah, absolutely. You come in and they've got questions for you. So how many kids does it take to open a bottle of beer? I mean, dads. I messed that one up.
Get him out.
Yeah, don't cut him off before he goes into the dad jokes. It's gonna get bad.
Megan might be a dad. I don't know because she's got dad jokes.
Yeah, if anything,
she just has dad jokes. I don't know.
If anything, the dad jokes, they're a system.debug requirement. I think.
I 100% agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah,
you better bring them jokes to the table.
You are the master. I'll just say that. I mean, the one that I sent you one not long ago, I can't remember what it was. But to be honest, like my daughter gave me that when she found it on Pinterest. So I can't even take credit for it. So I'm struggling to keep up with you on the dad jokes. But yeah. I think since we've descended into dad jokes,
it's about that time.
That's probably about that time. But are there any upcoming events here that we need to talk about? Like, not Texas Dream,
London
Trailhead DX.
Well, Trailhead DX is coming up, as well as and it's so funny. We always say Trailhead DX, but it's Trailhead X.
Yeah, I know. I always screw that up.
As well as London's Calling, and let's not forget about that one. Okay, let's not forget about London's Calling. You're going to get some great sessions over there if you're in that area. And if you run into people like Tom Blaumeyer and Carrie Townsend, make sure you say hi to them because we really appreciate everything they're doing for our community.
I'm pretty sure that was like last week, though, wasn't it? London's Calling.
I don't know. Everyone's talking about going to London's Calling on Twitter. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I could be off. I'm not going
to look it up.
But
the internet exists.
I Google London's Calling.
Southeast
the internet does exist, guys.
Southeast Dreamin' coming up in March as well, isn't it? Southeast Dreamin'.
Southeast Dreamin' is in March. It'll be the 15th and 16th, I believe. 15th and 16th, yeah, that's right. And I think Trailhead X is also in March. Is it, or is it in April?
The end of March. I think it's the end of March. It's like March 29th or something. Yeah.
Okay, so make sure you guys are staying tuned to those. Southeast Dreamin' is going to be great. I'm going to be here. RJ might be making an appearance. Hopefully, we're going to see what we can do about that. And then, but I'll be there. You know what I mean?
I guess
we'll be in the Atlanta area.
Maybe, to me, but I guess I might.
Even if we don't get tickets, me and RJ will be standing outside, handing out stickers. So So please give us your passes and let us know the parties.
Will we?
I don't know. It could happen. We've been known to do weird
Brian
things.
will be handing out stickers by himself. I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
So, all right, everybody.
I won't be able to make that trip. So, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you want me to bump out, don't you?
It's that time.
Soon and
Yeah.
someday. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Please, components. We're going to give a deadline on March 4th. So email them to system.debug@gmail.com. And we will make sure to post our email as well as the guidelines to our social media. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Have a good night.
Night, everybody.